Hello and welcome to the New Issue podcast. Envy makes the world go round, or is it the other way around? This month, we pick the brains of Shamir Hameed, creative director at Mosho Fixo and coordinator for Yakin Malaysia, an upcoming non-profit initiative that's gaining steam for its insistence on talking about the fundamentals of nation building. Shamir was originally from Penang before his educational journey took him halfway across the world, twice, and back again. Listen on for his illuminating thoughts on envy. You and I have been friends for a while now, and I think in many guises and forms, we have spoken about this. Maybe not in a formal setting, but the issue has crossed our minds many times. And I remember you telling me somewhat not so long ago, envy has an especially personal angle for you. Because of your life story, so to speak. Can you just elaborate on that?
If I remember, we were talking about how growing up in a different household sort of contributed to your paradigm in terms of how you look at things, and being surrounded by people who are, well, only later in life you realize that they were or are actually inferior, makes a lot of sense when you realize it at a later part of your life. So, for example, growing up, I have come across aunties who all they do is just talk negative about others, and they say things which are quite harsh. But to us at that time, since we have been always hearing it at home, it became sort of a norm. It was not looked at as something not good.
And this was in Penang.
In Penang, yeah, exactly. In Penang, because there's a lot of competition, and in general, I mean, Muslims, Malay Muslims or Indian Muslims in Penang are quite, how do you say, limited in the sense, economically as well. So there's only a few that are able to sort of judge and compare each other, because the others are different, and most of them have already moved to KL, right? So every time we go to weddings and things like that, it always becomes a exhibition to see who's in what status, and always it goes down to the jewelry that they wear that sort of defines their status. The heavier it is, the higher they are. So you get all these cynical comments like, "Ooh, look at that, and look at this, and where did they get the money from?" And so, to us, I mean, as a kid, as a child, I never looked at it as something negative until I moved out of Penang and I was living on my own, and you get exposed to many different types of friends. You have seen people who you have spoken to people who are very objective about things. They come from a very different background, and you really mix around. You get exposed, you get awareness, and then you realize, wow, it takes time though. It takes time. It wasn't until maybe at least 6-7 years ago that I started realizing that there's been many flaws in terms of my growing up. So you then need to challenge yourself to reform those opinions, and that is not an easy task because it's going against the grain.
And also because it's already a habit.
It's a habit.
You grow up with something.
Yes.
And then suddenly, positive or negative, it's already part of you. So changing something that's already part of it is very easy. But then you mentioned that you left Penang, whether it's for school. It was for school, yeah.
It was for school, but it was a big decision because at that time, honestly, family was a bit shaky, and there were a lot of issues going around. So my uncle, who is in fact my godfather, he stepped in and he said, I think we should send Shamir overseas or somewhere out of Penang so that it's more conducive for him to grow and study. So the things like reforming the opinions, one thing that I've learned that could ease that challenge is a big event in your life. Of course, you need that catalyst. So that abrupt change in my lifestyle and taking me out of that comfort zone made me realize many things. And from then on, it was a graph that was going up and down. I was sent to Australia, and at 16, never been outside of Penang much. And suddenly you are in Australia, in Adelaide, in some Ulu place, in a boarding house, mixing with country boys, because there it's more of, those who are in agriculture, they are quite well to do in Australia, so they send their children to elite boarding schools and everything. So I was only with them, and the moment they found out I was Muslim and Asian, that's it. So that was a culture shock for me.
Now, in those circumstances, because like you said before, Penang had its fair share of deficiency. But then leaving Malaysia and being forced to confront privilege. Now, for a lot of people, that would just take them to the other opposite, because it's a lot of things to just digest.
Yes.
Especially since you say people form habits,
Yes.
and you're used to sort of comparing yourself. But did that happen to you, or?
I was actually, being in a very negative environment in Penang. At the same time, I would say to a certain extent superstitious. I was more concerned about which friend was envious of me going to Australia, because I was in a normal government school, and I mixed around with many types of people from different economic backgrounds, different races. So at the same time, when most of them heard the news that I'm going to Australia, suddenly you get the cold shoulder, because to many of them it's the dream, isn't it?
So you became the target instead.
Yeah, I was sort of, I think it was not as bad, but internally I was feeling a bit uncomfortable about it, the whole thing. And then it sort of like fulfills, it's like a prophecy, apa ni? It's something where when I was in Australia and I was going through those challenges, it sort of couldn't stop me from connecting it back to what if it was their envy, or they did something like black magic or something, so that I'm not comfortable in Australia, and that was so uncomfortable. At that time, that was the mindset. I couldn't get out of it. At that very low esteem of yours, you're still being superstitious about things. So when I look back today and think about it, I actually laugh, because I'm no longer like that. And we will come to how that changed later on. Now you can see that, with reading a lot of self-help books and all that, it really helps you to mold that sort of mindset of yours. And you end up actually becoming a listener to many of your friends. Was that Stephen Covey? How to be a happy teenager or something. Or the other one was Seven Habits. Highly effective teen. Mm-hmm. I kind of started off with that, because when I came back from Australia, so in Australia I lasted 1 year when I was 16, and I came back and I joined a international school here. It was a totally different experience. That was just amazing for me. It was my life turning point in life. Whatever that I saw in Australia in terms of facilities, people, teachers and all that, it was exactly the same. Only thing, it was more Malaysian. I was just so excited, but it came with a setback, because I did my Form 4 equivalent in Australia. So I joined Form 5 in KTJ. Within 3 months, the teachers asked me to go back to Form 4, because it was not the same. Mm-hmm. And again, it really hit my esteem. So again, I was going back and thinking, maybe people are envious and blah, blah, blah. So I still had that mindset still right there.
Someone was trying to pull you down.
Yeah, pull me down. And, I think it's very common among Malay Muslims, especially these, also Indians, that superstitions like black magic, things like that, and you always have these ustads, seconding that opinion, like it's just, it doesn't help, gangguan syaitan and those kind of terms. I'm sure many people have heard it again and again and again.
It's like, as much as here in Malaysia you might want to think of yourself as living in a modern society, but that element of your culture is there somewhere at the back of your mind.
Yes.
So it can be as rational as you want.
It's still embedded in
it's,
there.
but it's there somewhere. It's
Yeah.
like, what if it's true? I shouldn't be believing in this. Yeah.
It's just like when you miss your prayers, you suddenly think you're berdosa. Because you've been molded from young about those things. So it's really hard to go against the grain. Not that I'm saying that you shouldn't pray or anything, but just an example. I learned a lot from my godmom because she is one of the very positive people I've met in my life, and which I've learned a lot from. And one thing that I cannot forget that she told me was, when you meet a person for the first time, start with 100. Don't start with 0, because most of us start from 0, and sometimes we'll go even to negative. Start from 100. Don't judge them yet. Don't. Just give them 100, and as you learn about them, then you can do your deductions as you experience, or you can do your additions as you experience. So
you let them find their level.
yes, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Why should you already judge someone the moment you meet them? And who are you? And that changed my paradigm a lot. And ever since then, although it was hard at first, but I sort of trained myself to do that, and which made me very uncomfortable to go back to Penang sometimes, because there, all you listen to is just negativity, being cynical and things like that. So I'll make short trips to Penang because my parents are there. I go visit them. My grandpa is there, and my brother and sister at that time were there. So I have to go back, of course. But then it was just uncomfortable at times. But that's a different phase where you're trying to change, but you go back to that condition, and you're feeling frustrated because the condition is still the same, and here you are trying to change. But after that, you mature in a sense where you let it be. You just care about who you are. You don't need to preach to them to change, because they're already like that. But you need to tolerate them because they're your family no matter what. And you can insert a line here and there to just neutralize things. And that is another stage of maturity, I think, that I had to go through. And today I look at myself still learning, of course, but I'm more settled in that sense, in terms of facing all this talk of envy. And I mean, of course, as human beings, we are envious of many things. We can be envious of anything. Like, I would want to have a nice physique, and people say that, oh, if you see another dude who has the best physique with the best girl, best looking girl, you're like envious of it. But personally, I'm not trying to be an angel or anything, but I'm just telling you bluntly, like, how I actually feel. I look at it as a motivation. Okay, fine. If that dude can do it, I can do it too. So I'm channeling, I'm switching that energy into something else, rather than growing hatred towards that dude who you don't even know. You rather make it beneficial towards you, because in the end, that's what matters, isn't it?
Yeah, and he might have gone through the same process.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Yeah, he saw some guy
Yeah.
who in his mind was successful. He thought, you know what, I can be like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but what caused that change for you?
The change of thinking.
How do you get from sort of being almost resigned, to the things that life throws at you, because life is always going to be a bunch of problems, and it is as easy, or it's probably easier, to just accept that things are difficult and
Yes.
blame everything except yourself.
Yes.
So, but now you're telling us that you decided not to do that. At least you're trying not to do that.
Yes.
And, like what your godmother said about give people 100 and all that. So, what really cemented that in?
I think getting hit cemented that, because each time you get hit, like I said, it takes a big event for you to trigger a change. But like I was saying, what changed me was those triggers. Each event triggered something, and then you become more positive. Of course, spirituality makes a big difference as well. Because when I came back from Australia the first time around, this was when I was 16, I had a lot of questions for the amount of trauma that I went through. I started questioning, I started, going against a lot of things.
What do you mean by questions?
Questions like, the typical questions of a teenager trying to find his footing, especially in terms of religion. Like, who is God? Why wasn't God there? What is the use of all this? And fair enough, there was a phase where everything, you were against it, just to be rebellious. But then it made you stronger. Somehow it flips back into position and sort of cements your faith in say, in my case, Islam. And you start to see things beyond what has been taught to you. Again, these are all like things like envy. Even in Christianity, envy is number 3. The third
The deadly sins.
third deadly sin. First is pride, and then it's greed. No, it's lust, greed, envy.
I know of them, just not in the right order.
Oh, okay, right. No,
Pride,
yeah, so
greed, sloth,
lust is
envy.
the lowest.
Yeah.
Then followed by greed, and then comes envy. Envy is in the middle, and then after that it ends with pride. So envy is right there in the middle, and it has always been told to us that you shouldn't be envious. Although I think it's a human nature to be envious, but not. I think it's not because you want to spoil someone else or make life harder for them. Actually, it makes life harder for you. So I start to understand through the religious perspective, maybe that's what it actually means, because the religion is just for you and yourself, and to internalize these things. So let's look at it in a different angle, and that's how I sort of try to make a difference. And today you can see through the initiatives that I'm taking part in, we are trying to spread this good message that let's be positive in whatever we come across, especially towards building the nation and things like that, since I'm in this campaign.
So okay, let's just take that from this retrospective
View.
that we've been going on for the past few minutes, and let's just step into the present right now. Now, Shamir, you're doing this thing called Yakin Malaysia, which is basically a kind of nation-building initiative.
Yes.
Or is a positive message that you want to send out to Malaysians about their own country. Because do you see analogs or sort of parallels between your personal history and just society in general? Because
There's a lot of similarities. I think if you were to put Malaysians, the whole of Malaysia, as a person, I think we are quite an inferior bunch. No, we lack esteem.
we feel very inferior.
Yes, we have low self-esteem. Politically, we're not matured. That's another story. But in terms of esteem, that's why we are finding it hard to, unite despite the differences that we have, instead of celebrating the differences. So let's say when someone is very low in self-esteem, the person will be resigned, very, very reserved, not wanting to share, and whatever they earn or whatever they achieve, it's just for them. So we see a similar pattern in the way the whole society is, in that sense. Everybody wants things to themselves. And then we always have people blaming each other, oh, this particular race does things for this particular race, and it's very racial. And so, okay, as myself as a person and the society as a person, self-esteem is low. And how do we try and build that up? We need to reaffirm them. We need to reaffirm them that the picture painted might be the worst picture, but it is not as bad as that. And it is you who needs to come out of that hole and do something about it. We are asking people to become doers rather than just sitting down, talking, chatting online and complaining about the country, and also many of them who are leaving the country. So there are many ways to build this country. We want people to build this nation. Each and everyone has a responsibility. They are the building block. We just want to remind this. That's all. We just want to remind it. It is there. People have that passion towards Malaysia, especially when it comes to sports or food. But that's just too cliched now. Come on, there can be more than that, of course. And it doesn't mean that you can be different in terms of race, religion, which is always talked about, but let's look at professions as well. You can be an engineer, I can be a creative, someone can be a doctor, and all of us can do our part in building the nation. It doesn't mean that a nation builder only is exclusive to a politician.
I would imagine there would be you face a lot of challenges in selling this message to the Malaysians because, take for instance, myself, I am Malay Muslim. In the scheme of things, this Bumi Putra character
Yes.
is someone who is widely thought as privileged, but by everyone across the board because of the things, just the way the society is composed, or at least the way society is perceived. But it's not a true picture of what's going on. Yes, there are people who are privileged. There are people who gain the lion's share of things, but the perception and the negative image is there, so there is a lot of enmity. I did never really notice it, but now when you're out there, subject to the general streams of sentiments, and you really notice how polarized things have become. Even the people that you grew up with, who were your friends, who you sat next to, suddenly become very distant, not because of money, and there's not enough money for everyone, not because of the difference in language, but it's just because, and this is my perception of things, you are viewed as something that sometimes it's not something that you want to be viewed as, because you are your own person, but you've been reduced to a racial stereotype.
You're being labeled.
You're being labeled. And the question is, do you label the other person as well? How does Yakin fit into the scheme of things? Because it's a very tight space you're moving in.
Yes, it's a very fine line as well, because first thing that people want to do out there when we first introduce ourselves is, who are you? Who are you working for? Who is funding you? So there's always a doubt in anything that comes out. So we just need to establish ourselves clearly that we're non-political, but we can't stop people with their own political beliefs to join us and have faith. Have faith is not exclusive for a certain person. Anyone can have faith. So therefore, it will be clearer to say that we are cross-political. We are, how do you say?
Meta-politics. No?
Yeah.
Meta-political.
Anyone, yeah.
Both politics.
It's just open. It's just open, yeah. And the first issue that we came up with in our article was about prejudice. Like you were saying, it really resonates with that. Prejudice is what's going on around. You look at a guy who looks a bit Malay, you're already prejudiced. Oh, okay, he's got boomy rights. You see a Chinese, and you're like, okay, that guy is controlling the economy. So why should you label it that way? I have, with my own experience, I've seen people and my friends as well who are boomies, but they're very uncomfortable with that label because they're the type who work hard for what they want to earn and achieve, and it can just be ridiculed by just one sentence. He was just a boomy. So it's very unfair for them. At the same time, I think the picture painted is really different, and this reminds me of this debate when I was in Melbourne, organized by Masca, I think. There was a debate about NEP, I found it very interesting because here we are debating about the new economic policy of Malaysia in Melbourne among Malaysians, and the people there, the predominantly are urban crowd, urban Malaysians who are quite well to do in terms of income, so their economic standing is pretty okay, and they're there
pretty confident in terms
pretty
of
confident in what they believe, yes. and they're also pretty confident in saying that these things are not right. We should believe in merits and things like that. So they did a polling before the debate whether the NEP was useful or not. Of course, people said no. The amount of people who said no was just far than the yes. And then the debate went on. During the debate, many things were covered. The rationale behind NEP was covered. Why? Why was it first of all implemented? What happened during that time? And funny enough, after the debate, people said that yes, it was necessary. But what they failed to see is that it is necessary at that time. Yes, we maybe one thing that was not done was updating of that policy, because it is flawed in the sense where there's a 30-40-30 how do you say division that needs the fraction that needs to be achieved. But
It's a very sad formula.
yeah, it's a very sad formula. But 30% does not mean it's distributed evenly. Like one person can own 10% of the 30%. That's the flaw. That's the flaw, and people fail to look at it. It's always about being threatened. I think again, envy comes into place, because one race would say, "Hey, these people are controlling the economy." The other people will be like, "Hey, we're working hard for it. You work hard as well." I always love this thing that I went to in Melbourne, because just a little bit of information can change maybe the perception they have had since they were young. Just a little bit of information. Just be honest.
That's all from Shamir for this month's podcast. As usual, many more where that came from. Our contributors have racked their brains to come up with their responses to the theme. Finally, don't forget to like our page if you haven't, and share it with a friend if you have. Details below. Happy reading, and have a great new year.